My father demanded. 80% of your salary will go to your brother and the other 20% for me. It's that simple. I laughed and said, I'm leaving and not giving you a dime. Pay your own bills. It's that simple. He went nuclear. Hey Reddit, this is the story of how I, 28 male, went from a family ATM to the guy who nuked their entire existence and walked away with zero shits given. Meet my family. A 52-year-old wannabe dictator named Jerry and his 25-year-old golden boy, Spawn Evan. These two clowns turned our house into their personal kingdom, where I was the peasant funding their lifestyle. Jerry used to work construction until my mom Marina bounced to Germany for a nursing job when I was 16. The minute those Eurochecks started showing up, this guy hung up his tool belt real fast. His logic? Why break my back when Marina's got us covered from overseas? The day Jerry decided to become professionally unemployed is burned into my memory. I came home from school to find him ceremoniously throwing his work boots in the trash while cracking open a celebratory drink at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Your old man's retired, Ezra, he announced like he'd just won the lottery instead of deciding to become a parasite. Time for you to step up and be the provider this family needs. I was freaking years old, but Jerry had already decided my future involved bankrolling his delusions of grandeur. But Jerry wasn't content just being lazy. He needed to be in control. Every decision in the house went through him. What we ate, what channels we watched, who could use the car, when the heat got turned on. Small dick energy compensating by micromanaging everything he could touch. Then there's Evan, my younger brother and Jerry's mini-me. This guy was 25 but acted like he was still 15, complete with the attitude that the world owed him everything. While I was working factory shifts, Evan was perfecting his Xbox skills and his talent for being a complete dickhead to anyone who suggested he get a job. He worked maybe 15 hours a week at some GameStop knockoff, spending his entire paycheck on energy drinks, weed, and whatever new sneakers would help him pretend he wasn't a loser. The rest of his time? Sitting in his room playing Call of Duty and talking shit to 12-year-olds online? He'd stay up until 4 a.m. screaming at his gaming headset, then sleep until 2 p.m. and complain about being exhausted from his demanding schedule of doing absolutely nothing productive. Jerry defended this as Evan finding his passion, like being a professional disappointment was some kind of legitimate career path. Our house was this shitty ranch-style place where the foundation was slowly sinking, and the pipes sounded like dying animals every time someone flushed. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and the constant smell of Jerry's Marlboros mixed with Evan's energy drink farts. Jerry ruled this kingdom from his throne, a recliner so worn down it had permanent ass grooves. From there, he'd bark orders, criticize everything I did, and remind me daily that I owed him for putting a roof over my head. The shittiest part? I believed him. When Mom left, she pulled me aside and said, "Take care of your father and brother. You're the man of the house now, Ezra. Don't let them down." Jerry made sure I understood the hierarchy. He was the king, Evan was the prince, and I was the court jester whose job was to pay for everyone's entertainment. Anytime I suggested Evan get a real job or Jerry actually contribute something, Jerry would remind me who was head of this household. "You live under my roof, you follow my rules," was his favorite line. Never mind that I was paying for that roof, those rules, and everything else that kept their pathetic lives running. But he had this way of making you feel like you were crazy for expecting basic respect. He'd twist every conversation until somehow you were the problem. He knew exactly which buttons to push to make me feel guilty for wanting anything for myself. And Evan? That little shit learned from the master, developing his own talent for making every request sound like an unreasonable demand. I spent my early 20s convinced that sacrificing everything for these two was normal. That family meant being everyone else's solution to problems they created. That wanting to keep some of what I earned made me selfish. It doesn't. And they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. At 19, I landed a job at this metal fabrication plant about 30 minutes outside town. 8 hours of cutting steel, welding brackets, and slowly destroying my hearing in a factory that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. Pay was shit, but it was steady, and somebody had to keep Jerry's kingdom from collapsing. The plant was run by this old-school hardass named Frank, who'd been there since the place opened. First week on the job, he pulled me aside and said, "Kid, I can tell the difference between guys who work and guys who just show up. Which one are you going to be?" I told him I needed the job too much to mess around. He nodded and said, "Good, because the guys who just show up don't last here, and I can spot them from across the floor." He became my unofficial mentor, teaching me that respect at work was earned through competence, not begging or playing politics. Every 2 weeks, like some medieval tax collector, Jerry would be waiting for me with his hand out, not asking, demanding. He'd cornered me after my first paycheck and explained how things worked in his house. Your money goes into the family pot, he said, like he was explaining basic math to a toddler. I decide how it gets spent. Rent, utilities, groceries, everything. You want to spend money? You ask me for it. Ask him. For my own money. That I earned. While he sat on his ass watching Judge Judy reruns. Jerry had this ritual around payday that still makes my blood boil thinking about it. He'd position himself at the kitchen table with a calculator, legal pad, and this smug expression like he was some kind of financial genius. Let's see what the family earned this week, he'd say, like he'd contributed a single cent. Then he'd itemize every expense, real and imaginary, while I stood there like a kid getting lectured about allowance. Rent portion, utilities, groceries, miscellaneous household expenses. The miscellaneous category somehow always included his beer money and Evan's latest gaming purchase. But he wasn't just taking my money, he was taking my autonomy. He controlled the bank account my checks went into. He decided what groceries we bought. He determined if I could afford to buy work boots when mine had holes in them. You don't need name brand boots, Ezra. These Walmart ones will do fine. Meanwhile, Evan got an allowance. Like he was 12 years old. Jerry would hand him $50 every weekend for being a good kid, while I had to justify buying soap. Evan's contribution to the household? Jack shit. He'd occasionally take out the trash if Jerry specifically told him to, but that was about it. Cooking, cleaning, yard work, all that fell to me. According to Jerry, Evan was still figuring himself out and didn't need the pressure of real responsibility. The kid was 25. Most people have figured out how to wash dishes by then. The disparity in how Jerry treated us became a daily humiliation. Evan could sleep until noon, leave dirty dishes everywhere, and treat the house like his personal frat house, while I was held to military standards. I had a curfew at 22 years old, a freaking curfew, while Evan could stumble home at 3 a.m. reeking of cheap weed without consequences. Evan's still young, Jerry would explain when I pointed out the hypocrisy. You're the responsible one. Act like it. Translation. Evan gets to be a perpetual teenager while you get to be everyone's parent. Weekends were the worst. That's when Jerry's crew would show up, a collection of unemployed middle-aged guys who'd turned day drinking into an Olympic sport. They'd park themselves in our backyard, drain a case of drinks, and solve all the world's problems through the wisdom of Budweiser. I'd come home from overtime shifts to find these champions of society passed out in lawn chairs, while Jerry held court like some discount Tony Soprano. Evan would join them sometimes, trying to act like one of the guys. Nothing sadder than watching a 25-year-old trying to impress his dad's unemployed drinking buddies with stories about his latest gaming achievements. Jerry had this way of making me feel guilty for wanting anything. He'd weaponize Mom's promise constantly. Your mother trusted you to take care of us. You gonna let her down? You gonna be that kind of son? Evan learned to play the same game. Anytime I asked him to contribute something, anything, he'd whine to Jerry about me being mean or picking on him. Jerry would immediately take his side, reminding me that Evan was going through a tough time and needed support, not pressure. A tough time. The guy lived rent-free, ate food he didn't pay for, and had zero responsibilities beyond not shitting himself. Real hardship. But I kept grinding, telling myself it was temporary. That eventually Jerry would realize he needed to contribute, or Evan would grow up and get a real job. That my sacrifice meant something. What I didn't realize was that Jerry was perfectly happy with our arrangement. He had a live-in ATM who paid all the bills and never complained. Why would he want that to change? Well, he was about to find out that every ATM has a withdrawal limit. 3 years into the factory nightmare, management noticed something unusual. I actually gave a shit about doing good work. While my coworkers were perfecting the art of looking busy, I was fixing problems, streamlining processes, and generally acting like someone who understood that work quality matters. They promoted me to floor supervisor. Small bump in pay, but more importantly, it got me noticed by the front office guys who made real decisions. Turns out I had a natural talent for logistics and organization. Frank was the first to recognize my potential. One day he called me into his office and said, Ezra, you see things other people miss. Yesterday you caught that shipping error that would have cost us 50 grand. Most guys would have just signed the paperwork and let it become someone else's problem. You ever think about moving beyond the factory floor? That conversation planted a seed. Frank introduced me to the operations manager, who started giving me special projects that showcased my analytical skills. Within 2 years, they moved me to operations management, then supply chain coordination, then regional logistics. Each promotion came with a bigger salary and more respect from people who weren't related to me. In 6 years, I went from cutting metal for peanuts to managing multi-million-dollar contracts. My salary increased by a factor of 10. But here's the beautiful part. Jerry and Evan never knew. The secrecy became an art form. I'd leave the house in the same beat-up work clothes, drive to a gas station 3 miles away, and change into business attire in the bathroom. My factory had apparently started requiring office meetings that explained why I was wearing khakis instead of steel-toed boots. Jerry bought it completely because the alternative, that his employee's son had become more successful than he'd ever been, was unthinkable to his narcissistic brain. I kept handing over the same amount every payday, the equivalent of my original factory wages. The rest went into accounts they didn't know existed, spread across 3 different banks to avoid any accidental discoveries. Jerry would still sit in his throne, demanding his tribute with the same entitled attitude. "Come on, Ezra, don't make me wait for the household money." And I'd hand it over with a straight face while mentally calculating how much was accumulating in my secret war chest. By year 5, I had enough saved to buy a house outright. By year 6, I could have lived comfortably for 3 years without working at all. The hardest part wasn't hiding the money. It was watching these two waste what I gave them. Jerry's drinking budget alone could have paid for a decent vacation. Evan's monthly allowance was more than some people's grocery bills. My real job became increasingly demanding and rewarding. Meanwhile, at home, I was still being lectured about fiscal responsibility by a man whose greatest financial achievement was successfully cashing unemployment checks. The cognitive dissonance was mind-bending. I'd close a deal that would save the company $300K annually, then come home to Jerry explaining why I couldn't afford better work boots. But Jerry's control obsession made everything easier to hide. He never questioned where I worked or what I did, as long as the money kept coming. In his mind, I was still the same broke kid cutting metal for minimum wage. Evan was even more oblivious. This guy thought money just appeared magically, like it was delivered by the same fairy that cleaned his room and did his laundry. The concept that someone had to earn it was completely foreign to him. I started traveling for work, visiting suppliers, managing contracts, attending industry conferences. Jerry just saw it as me being away from the house, which meant less interference with his daily routine of drinking and playing king of the castle. "Don't forget to call and check in," he'd say, like I was a teenager going to summer camp. Neither of them had any idea that the guy they treated like hired help was actually making more money than Jerry had ever seen in his life. But I kept playing the role, kept pretending to be broke while building my escape fund, kept acting like their financial bitch while secretly planning my independence. The account kept growing. 6 figures, then 7. For the first time since Mom left, I had hope, real hope, backed by real money, that I could actually get away from these toxic assholes and live for myself. What I didn't know was that my little secret was about to explode. March 12th, 2024. That's the date my carefully constructed double life went nuclear. I just closed a massive contract that would save the company about $800,000 annually. My bonus from that deal alone was more than Jerry had made in the last 5 years combined. I printed the direct deposit confirmation to file with my other records, but I was running on 3 hours of sleep and made a fatal mistake. I left it on my kitchen counter. Evan found it the next morning while scavenging for breakfast money. "Holy shit, Ezra!" he screamed loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. "Look at this freaking number!" Jerry came running like Evan had discovered oil in the backyard. When he saw that deposit slip, his face went through about 6 different emotions in 10 seconds. The silence that followed Evan's discovery was deafening. Jerry just stood there holding that piece of paper like it was the Dead Sea Scrolls, his mouth opening and closing, like a fish drowning in air. Evan was practically vibrating with excitement, probably already mentally spending money that wasn't his. "Dude, this changes everything," Evan said, his voice cracking with greed. "We're freaking rich." "This is what they're paying you?" Jerry said, holding the paper like it was evidence of my crimes against the family. "And you've been giving us the same bullshit allowance for years?" I tried to stay calm. "That money is mine, Dad. I earned it. You two don't contribute anything to this house except drama and bills." Jerry's face turned that special shade of red he got when someone dared question his authority. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. This is my house, and I decide how money gets spent here." Evan jumped in with his usual brilliance. "We saw how much you make, Ezra. You've been holding out on us. I want a car, a nice one, and my own place. You can afford it now." The entitlement was breathtaking, but Jerry had bigger plans. He sat back down in his throne and laid out his new world order with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life. Here's how this is going to work, Ezra. From now on, you give me access to all your accounts. I'll manage the money properly. Make sure Evan gets what he needs for his future. Make sure I can enjoy my retirement properly. You'll get an allowance, just like Evan. Maybe 500 a week if you're good. 500 a week out of my six-figure salary. And another thing, Jerry continued, really warming up to his dictatorship fantasy. No more of this traveling for work bullshit. You'll get a local job where I can keep an eye on you. Can't have you getting ideas above your station. Jerry's demands revealed the depth of his delusion. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, power, and his desperate need to maintain his position as the alpha in a pack where he'd never actually been the strongest. I've been too lenient with you. Clearly, you can't be trusted to make good decisions on your own. The irony was staggering. The man who hadn't made a good decision since the Clinton administration was going to manage my career. That's when I started laughing. Absolutely not, I said. I'm done with this. I'm moving out. Jerry's face went from red to purple. The hell you are. You're not going anywhere. I headed to my room to start packing. That's when Jerry showed me what not going anywhere really meant. He grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. Before I could react, his fist connected with my jaw hard enough to snap my head sideways. I stumbled backward, tasting blood, while Jerry stood over me like some trailer park tyrant. You live in my house. You follow my rules, he said, flexing his hand. Now get your ass in that kitchen and we'll discuss your new budget like civilized people. Evan was standing in the doorway with this sick smile on his face. Maybe next time you'll listen when Dad's talking, Evan said, clearly enjoying the show. I touched my jaw and felt the swelling starting. Looked at these two pieces of shit who thought violence was an acceptable way to handle me wanting basic human dignity. And something inside me just snapped. Okay, I said, standing up slowly. You want to do this the hard way? Let's do it the hard way. In the evening, I drove straight to the police station with a fat lip and a jaw that felt like it had been hit with a crowbar. Filed a formal assault complaint against Jerry, complete with photos of my injuries and a detailed statement about the financial abuse and control. The cops were surprisingly helpful. They sent 2 officers to arrest Jerry that same day. Evan called me while Jerry was being processed, screaming about how I was destroying the family and demanding I drop the charges. I hung up on him and blocked his number. Jerry spent the night in county lockup before making bail. When he got out, he called me from his lawyer's office. Drop the charges, Ezra, he said, trying to sound reasonable instead of desperate. This is family business. We don't air family business in court. Nope, I said. You wanted to play dictator? Now you get to play defendant. That's when his mask completely slipped. The calm, reasonable voice disappeared, replaced by pure rage. You little shit. You think you can destroy me? I made you. I can unmake you just as easy. Drop those charges or you'll regret it. I hung up and called my lawyer. Time to see how Jerry liked playing games with someone who could afford better legal representation than whatever public defender he'd managed to scrape together. The assault charge was just the beginning. Jerry was about to learn that threatening the guy who'd been secretly documenting financial abuse for years was a very, very bad idea. Jerry's arrest was just the opening move. What came next was a months-long legal chess match where I had every advantage and he was playing with checkers. See, Jerry made one crucial mistake. He thought I was still the same broke kid he'd been controlling for over a decade. He had no idea he was threatening someone with serious resources and absolutely nothing left to lose. My lawyer, Allison Chen, was a pit bull in a tailored suit who specialized in family law and domestic abuse cases. When I showed her my documentation of 12 years of financial control and abuse, her eyes lit up. Your father's looking at more than just assault charges, she said, spreading out my bank records and Jerry's financial history. Financial abuse, theft, intimidation, we can make his life very complicated. Allison's thoroughness was impressive and terrifying. She dissected Jerry's financial history like a forensic accountant hunting war criminals. Your father has been living above his means for 12 years with no reportable income, she explained, pulling out spreadsheets that made Jerry's napkin budgeting look like crayon drawings. The IRS tends to take a dim view of people who live like kings while claiming to be paupers. We're not just going to destroy him legally. We're going to financially eviscerate him. The assault case was airtight. Hospital photos, police reports, witness statements from neighbors who'd heard Jerry screaming threats. But we went deeper. Has he ever filed taxes on the money you've been giving him? She asked. I started laughing. Jerry filing taxes? The guy who thought the IRS was some kind of government conspiracy? Never. He's been treating it like gift money for 12 years. That's tax evasion. on a significant scale. I think we need to have a conversation with some federal friends of mine. While Jerry was dealing with his criminal charges, I had another problem. Evan. This little shit had decided to play enforcer for his daddy, and he was about to learn why that was a mistake. The harassment started the day after Jerry's arrest. Evan would drive by my new apartment at all hours, sitting in his car like some discount private investigator. He'd follow me to work, to the grocery store, even to the gym. Then came the texts. Hundreds of them. You're dead when this is over. Snitches get stitches, brother. Dad's gonna make you pay for this. You better watch your back. Standard tough guy bullshit from someone who'd never thrown a punch in his life, but he was just getting started. He started showing up at my workplace, demanding to see me. Security had to escort him off the property twice. He called my boss, trying to spread lies about me being unstable and dangerous to work with. His workplace harassment backfired. My boss, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who'd built her career in male-dominated industries, took one look at the situation and said, "Someone's trying to intimidate my best logistics manager? Over my dead body." She immediately involved corporate security and legal, documenting every incident with the precision of someone who dealt with workplace harassment before. "We protect our people here," Patricia told me, "and we don't negotiate with wannabe thugs who think they can threaten our employees." Having corporate backing felt like being handed a loaded weapon. That's when my cousin Ronnie entered the picture, and thank God for that guy. Ronnie was 2 years older than me, built like a linebacker, and had the kind of dark sense of humor that comes from being a paramedic who'd seen every form of human stupidity imaginable. We'd always been close, but he lived 3 hours away, so I hadn't seen him much during the Jerry years. When I called him to explain what was happening, his response was exactly what I needed to hear. "Wait a minute," Ronnie said. "Your sperm donor punched you for wanting to keep your own money, and now his other spawn is playing gangster? Jesus, Ezra, it's like white trash bingo over there." Ronnie drove down the next weekend, took one look at Evan sitting in his car outside my apartment, and knocked on his window. "Hey, discount Batman," Ronnie said when Evan rolled it down. "Remember me? Your cousin who spent 4 years in the Marines before becoming a paramedic? You know what I learned in those jobs?" Evan shook his head, probably terrified. "How to make someone disappear without leaving marks, and exactly how to keep them alive while I do it. So here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna stop this stalker bullshit, or I'm gonna show you what a real threat looks like. Are we clear?" Evan drove off and didn't come back for 3 days. Ronnie helped me document every harassment incident, every threatening text, every time Evan showed up where he wasn't supposed to be. "Your brother's building our restraining order case for us," Ronnie said, photographing Evan's latest threatening message. "The kid's too stupid to realize he's creating evidence." He was right. Evan's escalation was perfect for what came next. A restraining order that would legally require both Jerry and Evan to stay away from me, my home, and my workplace. The hearing was beautiful. Jerry showed up in a cheap suit, probably borrowed from his lawyer, trying to look respectable. Evan wore a hoodie and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My documentation was overwhelming. Months of threatening texts, photos of Evan stalking me, witness statements from neighbors and co-workers. The judge took about 5 minutes to grant the restraining order. "Mr. Jerry and Mr. Evan," the judge said, looking at them like they were something unpleasant he'd stepped in, "you are to have no contact with the petitioner. No phone calls, no texts, no showing up at his residence or workplace. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest." Jerry's face was priceless. This man who'd spent years controlling every aspect of my life was being told by a judge that he couldn't even text me. But the best part was still coming. Allison had been building her case against Jerry, and she was ready to drop the hammer. "Your father's trial is next month," she told me after the restraining order hearing. "Assault, financial abuse, tax evasion. If convicted on all counts, he's looking at serious jail time." Jerry was about to learn that threatening someone with resources and legal representation was very different from bullying a broke teenager who thought he had no options. Game time. Jerry's trial was everything I dreamed it would be and more. Watching this wannabe dictator squirm in a defendant's chair while the prosecutor systematically destroyed his life was better than Christmas morning. The assault charge alone would have been enough, but Allison had built something beautiful. A comprehensive case that exposed Jerry for exactly what he was. A financial predator who'd spent over a decade stealing from his own son. The prosecution laid it out in detail. 12 years of taking my entire paycheck while contributing nothing. 12 years of financial control and manipulation. 12 years of tax evasion on money he'd essentially stolen from me. Jerry's public defender looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. You could see him calculating how screwed his client was with each piece of evidence. The prosecution's case was a masterclass in destruction. They had everything: bank records showing Jerry's complete lack of income, documentation of his unreported lifestyle, witness testimony about his control tactics, and the recorded threats he'd made from jail. The best moment came when they played the recorded phone call from jail, where Jerry threatened me for pressing charges. His voice, clear as day, promising to make me regret seeking justice. I made you. I can unmake you just as easy. The jury's faces said everything. 12 people looking at Jerry like he was something they'd scrape off their shoes. Evan sat in the gallery, trying to look supportive, but mostly succeeding in looking like he needed to change his pants. Ronnie sat next to me, occasionally whispering commentary that made it hard not to laugh. Your dad looks like he's about to shit himself, he observed during a particularly brutal cross-examination. Jerry took the stand in his own defense, which was a mistake of epic proportions. Under cross-examination, he tried to justify 12 years of financial abuse as teaching responsibility and claimed hitting me was just a father disciplining his son. The prosecutor was merciless. Mr. Jerry, your son was 28 years old when you struck him. In what world is that appropriate discipline? He was being disrespectful, living in my house, under my rules. Your house that he paid the mortgage on? Your rules funded by his salary? Jerry's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Jerry had basically confessed to financial abuse in open court. The verdict took the jury less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Jerry's sentencing was 3 weeks later. Allison had prepared a victim impact statement that laid out exactly what 12 years of abuse had cost me. Not just financially, but emotionally and psychologically. Jerry got 18 months in state prison, 5 years probation, and a court order to pay me restitution of $180,000, calculated as the amount he'd stolen over the years beyond what normal household contribution would have been. But the real cherry on top was the tax evasion conviction. The IRS had taken a very keen interest in Jerry's unreported income over the past 12 years. They hit him with back taxes, penalties, and interest that totaled more than he could ever pay. The IRS agent explained his situation. Mr. Jerry owes approximately $347,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest, she said, reviewing his file like she was reading a grocery list. Given his current financial situation and earning potential, we'll be garnishing any income he receives for the rest of his natural life. She looked up from her papers with a slight smile. Mr. Jerry will be making payments until he dies. Evan's response to his father's conviction was to double down on the harassment. The restraining order didn't seem to mean much to him. He started using burner phones to send threatening texts and got his gaming buddies to leave anonymous voicemails. Ronnie and I documented everything: photos, recordings, witness statements. Evan was building us a beautiful case for felony harassment and stalking. The second restraining order hearing was even more satisfying than the first. Evan showed up without a lawyer, representing himself with all the legal expertise of a ham sandwich. Your Honor, Evan said, actually addressing the judge directly, my brother destroyed our family. My dad's in prison because of him. I have a right to be angry. The judge looked at him like he'd just admitted to war crimes. You have a right to be angry, Mr. Evan. You do not have a right to stalk and threaten people. He got hit with a felony stalking charge, 6 months in county jail, and an extended restraining order that would follow him for 5 years. But Ronnie had the best observation as we left the courthouse. You know what the funniest part is? He said. These idiots could have just let you leave quietly, could have found jobs and figured out how to be adults. Instead, they chose to end up destroyed. He was absolutely right. The restitution money came in monthly payments garnished from Jerry's prison commissary account and whatever job Evan managed to hold down. Watching these two learn what consequences meant was worth every penny I'd spent on legal fees. But the best part was still coming. 2 years later, and I'm writing this from the deck of my new house. Not apartment, house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, attached garage, and a backyard where the only drinks bottles are the ones I put there myself. The fallout from Jerry and Evan's legal destruction was even more satisfying than I'd hoped. Jerry served his full 18 months and came out to discover that his kingdom had been repossessed. Turns out when you can't make mortgage payments from prison, banks get cranky about that. Jerry's release from prison was a masterpiece of poetic justice. I heard through the grapevine that he came out expecting to reclaim his throne, only to find the house in foreclosure and Evan living in a studio apartment that smelled like failure and ramen noodles. Without his live-in ATM, Jerry's kingdom crumbled faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Last I heard, he was renting a room from one of his drinking buddies and working part-time at a hardware store, handing over most of his paycheck to the IRS. Evan bounced between couch surfing and homeless shelters before finally getting a job at a car wash. His gaming setup got sold to pay legal fees, and his dreams of living off his brother's success died harder than his KD ratio. The restitution payments keep coming, about $800 a month between the two of them. It's like getting a bonus paycheck from the universe for standing up to bullies. My cousin Ronnie became more than just backup. He became my chosen family. The guy who had my back when blood relatives showed their true colors. We still text daily, and he visits every few months to make sure I'm not turning into a hermit. You know what I love about this whole situation? Ronnie said during his last visit, drinking on my deck while we grilled steaks. Jerry thought he was the king of the castle, but he was just a parasite. And parasites die when they lose their host? He had a point. Jerry's entire identity was built around controlling me. When that control disappeared, he had nothing left. Evan's identity was even more pathetic. The golden boy who never had to grow up because daddy would always take care of everything. Prison and real life hit him like a freight train. But the best revenge wasn't their destruction. It was my success. I'm now a regional director for the company, managing operations across 8 states. The salary is obscene, the benefits are ridiculous, and I travel to places I actually want to see instead of running away from toxic assholes. I'm dating Allison, the lawyer who helped destroy Jerry's case. Turns out we had a lot in common beyond our mutual appreciation for legal vengeance. She's got her own career, her own house, and her own therapy-approved way of dealing with toxic family members. She understood boundaries, respected autonomy, and never once demanded access to my finances or tried to control my decisions. Healthy relationships are about addition, not subtraction, she told me during one of our early dates. Good partners enhance your life without diminishing your independence. The restraining orders are still in effect for 3 more years. No contact, no communication, no showing up anywhere near my life. It's like having a legal force field around everything I've built. Sometimes I run into people from the old neighborhood who knew Jerry and Evan. They usually have some variation of, "I heard what happened with your family," followed by either sympathy or judgment. The judgment doesn't bother me anymore. Anyone who thinks I should have continued enabling 2 grown men who refuse to take care of themselves can join Jerry and Evan in the people whose opinions don't matter category. Jerry and Evan chose to be parasites instead of people. When their host finally said no more, they chose violence instead of self-improvement. When violence failed, they chose harassment instead of accepting consequences. Every choice they made was the wrong one. And me? I chose to build a life where toxic people can't reach me, and where my success is mine to enjoy, instead of being redistributed to people who never earned it. Jerry's probably eating prison food and planning his next appeal. Evan's probably scrubbing cars and dreaming about his glory days of Xbox achievements. And I'm living proof that sometimes the best family is the one you choose, instead of the one you're born into. If you're reading this and it sounds familiar, understand this. You have options. And you have the power to say, screw this, and build something better.